The sunny morning in Dallas, Texas, began with the usual golden glow filtering through the palm trees and the wrought iron gates of the upscale condominium where the Williams family lived. 15-year-old Aisha Williams was in her room, organizing her books and preparing for another day at school. As she dressed, Aisha thought about the tasks and tests ahead, but her mind often wandered to her mother's encouraging words. "Remember, Aisha, education is the key to your dreams," her mom used to say. Breakfast was ready when Aisha came downstairs to the kitchen. Her mother, Sandra, was making pancakes, and her father, James, was already sitting at the table with the newspaper in hand. "Good morning, dear." Sandra greeted her with a warm smile. "I made your favorite pancakes." Aisha smiled, sitting down at the table and grabbing her fork. "Thanks, Mom. I was thinking about studying more for the chemistry test," Aisha said, spreading butter on her pancakes. James, who worked as an engineer, looked up from his newspaper and said, "Studying is important, but don't forget to relax a bit too. Finding a balance is essential." "I know, Dad," Aisha replied, trying to hide the anxiety she felt about the test. After breakfast, Aisha grabbed her backpack and left the house, walking through the condominium toward school. The day seemed promising, but she didn't realize something unexpected was about to disrupt her routine. As she walked through the park in the condominium, Aisha noticed a patrol car parked near the playground. Officer Mark Thompson, a middle-aged police officer with a stern expression, was standing by the vehicle, watching the area with a suspicious gaze. Aisha continued on her way, but noticed the officer seemed to be watching her closely. Suddenly, he approached her. "Hello, young lady," Thompson said, his voice carrying an authoritative tone. "What are you doing here alone?" Aisha stopped, surprised by the approach. "I'm going to school," she replied, a bit nervously. "I'm just passing through the park." Thompson frowned and looked her up and down. "You don't look like you're on your way to school. There's no uniform, and you don't seem to be in a hurry. You might be doing something you shouldn't." Aisha was speechless, feeling a chill run down her spine at the unfounded accusation. "I'm just going to school," she repeated, trying to stay calm. "I'm not convinced," Thompson said, his voice growing harsher. "I need to see some identification." Feeling humiliated, Aisha tried to find her ID, but the officer was becoming increasingly impatient. "Don't you have anything better to do than watch me?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling as she tried to mask her anger and frustration. The officer's reaction was immediate and negative. He looked at her with disdain and continued to ask probing questions, while other residents of the condominium began to watch the scene with growing discomfort. When the situation seemed to have no end, Sandra, who had stepped out to get the mail, saw her daughter in distress and rushed over. "What's going on here?" Sandra asked, a mix of worry and indignation in her voice. Officer Thompson turned to Sandra and, without changing his tone, explained, "I'm just making sure the young lady is following the rules." Sandra, her heart racing, looked at Aisha and then at the officer. "My daughter is on her way to school. This is an overreach. I'm going to report this." As Sandra tried to calm the situation and took Aisha back home, Thompson's gaze remained stern and dismissive. The discomfort Aisha felt in that moment was about to evolve into something much bigger than she could imagine. The next day started with a cloudy sky over Dallas, reflecting Aisha's mood. She tried to focus on her classes, but the humiliation from the previous day still troubled her. During lunch, she found herself sitting alone in the cafeteria, absent-mindedly poking at the food on her plate. Sarah, her longtime friend, approached with a concerned look. "Hey, Aisha, you look different today. Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, sitting down next to Aisha and trying to sound casual. Aisha forced a smile and sighed lightly. I had a weird encounter yesterday. An officer approached me in the park and was really rude." Sarah frowned, surprised. "Seriously? What happened?" Before Aisha could respond, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. She quickly got up, trying to change the subject. "Don't worry about it, Sarah. Let's go to the next class." As classes went on, Aisha tried to keep her mind focused, But the previous day's experience followed her like a shadow. After school, she decided to take a different route home, hoping to avoid another encounter with Officer Mark Thompson. However, as she passed by the park again, Aisha saw the patrol car parked in a discreet corner. Her heart raced when she saw Officer Thompson getting out of the vehicle. He seemed to be searching for something or someone, and his eyes immediately locked onto Aisha. Aisha took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and quickly moved away. But Thompson spotted her and approached once more, making Aisha feel uncomfortable and nervous all over again. "Hello again, Miss Williams," Thompson said with a tone that didn't hide his hostility. "Still hanging around? Isn't it time for you to be home?" Aisha tried to keep her composure. The sun was setting over Dallas, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the sky. Yet, the beauty of the evening did little to dispel the discomfort and sadness that lingered over the Williams home. Aisha lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling with a distant look. The words and actions of Officer Thompson echoed in her mind, and she wondered why she had to endure such an ordeal. Sandra entered the room with a tray of light snacks. She placed the tray beside Aisha, trying to offer some comfort. "Aisha, dear, you need to eat something," Sandra said, trying to sound encouraging. "It's not good to skip meals." Aisha turned her head and looked at her mother with a tired smile. "I'm not hungry, Mom. I just want to forget all of this." Sandra sat beside her daughter, gently placing her hand over Aisha's. "I understand you're upset, but you need to take care of yourself. We'll get through this together. You're a strong person, and we'll resolve this situation." Aisha sighed and took a piece of fruit, eating it slowly. The feeling of being watched and treated with hostility weighed heavily on her mind, and she felt her life was spiraling out of control. At school, the atmosphere was equally tense. Aisha tried to focus on her classes, but her mind was elsewhere. Sarah noticed her friend's distress and, during the lunch break, decided to reach out. "Aisha, are you still thinking about what happened?" Sarah asked, sitting down next to Aisha in the cafeteria. Aisha looked at her and nodded. "Yeah, I can't stop thinking about it. It's like it's always on my mind." Sarah looked at Aisha with understanding. "I know it must be tough. Have you thought about talking to someone at school about it? Maybe a counselor or a trusted teacher could help." Aisha shook her head slowly. "I don't know. I don't want people to see me as a victim or think I'm exaggerating." Sarah took Aisha's hand. "Sometimes, talking to someone can help lighten the load. It doesn't mean you're exaggerating. It just means you're seeking support." Aisha appreciated the suggestion and decided to consider seeking help at school. That evening, when she got home, she decided to discuss it with her mother. "Mom, Sarah suggested I talk to a counselor at school. What do you think?" Aisha asked with a hopeful tone. Sandra smiled at her daughter, relieved to see that Aisha was open to seeking help. "I think it's a great idea. Sometimes talking to someone who can offer advice and support is really helpful. I'll help you set up a meeting with the counselor." As Aisha prepared for the next day, Sandra and James discussed the incident and its implications. James, concerned, decided to take a more active role. "Sandra, I've been thinking. We need to make sure Officer Thompson understands that his actions have consequences," James said, his voice firm. "I'll speak with Robert Anderson personally tomorrow." Sandra looked at her husband with a mix of apprehension and hope. "I think that's a good idea. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again and that our daughter gets the justice she deserves." The next morning was muggy and gray, as if the weather was mirroring the tension and worry in the Williams home. Aisha headed to school, the weight of the recent experience still visible on her face. Meanwhile, Sandra and James were preparing for their meeting with Robert Anderson, hoping it would bring some clarity and resolution to the situation. As Aisha made her way to school, Sandra and James were in the kitchen, discussing their next steps. "James, are you sure Robert will help us?" Sandra asked, glancing at the clock. "I'm sure. He's a man of integrity and has been our friend for a long time," James replied, trying to sound confident. "And besides, this isn't just a personal matter. It's about justice and accountability." Sandra nodded, though concern was still evident in her eyes. "I hope you're right. Aisha is so shaken, and I just want this to be over once and for all. Later, in Robert Anderson's office, James and Sandra were greeted by Robert's serious expression. He was seated behind a large desk filled with papers and folders. "James, Sandra, thank you for coming," Robert began, rising to greet them. "What can I do to help?" James, looking more resolute than ever, took the floor. "Robert, as you know, Officer Thompson made an aggressive and unjustified approach with our daughter yesterday. And unfortunately, it wasn't the first time. Yesterday, he treated her disrespectfully and unfairly, and it's having a significant impact on our family." Sandra interjected, her voice filled with emotion. "And this isn't just about what happened to Aisha. I looked into it and found that Officer Thompson has a history of problematic behavior. This isn't the first time he's acted in a discriminatory manner." Robert looked at them, his eyes serious. "This is extremely concerning. I wasn't aware of this previous behavior. I will personally ensure that a thorough investigation is launched." James nodded, relieved but still looking worried. "Thank you, Robert. We hope this investigation will uncover what's really going on and that steps will be taken to prevent this from happening to others." As they spoke, Sandra decided to share some additional information she had found about the officer's history. "I did some research and discovered that there have been several previous complaints against Thompson for similar behavior. Apparently, he has a pattern of problematic conduct, and this isn't an isolated incident." Robert, upon hearing this, paused and took note of the information. "This is serious. I will make sure that these complaints are reviewed as part of the investigation. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. It's crucial to ensure justice and to maintain the integrity and trust of our police department." The meeting ended on a more positive note, but Robert knew the real work was just beginning. He promised Sandra and James that he would take all necessary actions and maintain transparency throughout the process. Meanwhile, at school, Aisha was meeting with the school counselor, Mr. Miller, who had been recommended by Sarah. The environment was calm and welcoming as Aisha sat in a comfortable chair across from the counselor's desk. "So, Aisha, how can I help you today?" Mr. Miller asked, adjusting his glasses and smiling kindly. Aisha, a bit nervous, began to share her experience. I had a bad encounter with a police officer. He approached me aggressively and made me feel bad. It's really affecting me, and I don't know how to handle it." Mr. Miller listened attentively and took notes as Aisha spoke. "I'm sorry to hear that, Aisha. No one should be treated like that. It's important for you to know that your feelings are valid, and you have the right to feel safe and respected. We can work together to find ways to cope with this and to make sure you get the support you need." Aisha felt a sense of relief hearing the counselor's words. For the first time since the incident, she felt that someone was truly listening and caring about her well-being. At the end of the day, Sandra and James returned home, eager to hear updates from Robert Anderson. Meanwhile, Aisha felt a renewed sense of hope and support. The revelations about Officer Thompson's behavior were beginning to make sense, and the investigation promised to bring out the truth they were seeking. The day was clear and crisp, a comforting contrast to the tension of the past few days. Aisha was at school, trying to focus on her classes while recent events continued to occupy her mind. But the feeling of hope was beginning to grow, especially after talking with the counselor. Meanwhile, Sandra and James were eagerly anticipating their meeting with Robert Anderson, who had promised to initiate an investigation. At the Williams home, the atmosphere was filled with anticipation. Sandra was preparing coffee for both of them when James walked into the kitchen, his face showing a mix of determination and concern. "Do you think Robert will be able to handle this?" Sandra asked, pouring coffee into their mugs. James picked up a mug and looked at his wife with a resolute expression. "I'm sure he will. Robert is an honest man and is known for his commitment to justice. If there's something to be done, he'll find a way." Sandra sighed and sat down at the table. "I hope you're right. Aisha is still so affected, and I want her to feel safe again." James placed his hand over Sandra's, trying to offer some comfort. "We're doing everything we can, and the support we have from Robert and the school might be exactly what we need to make a difference." Soon, Sandra and James received a phone call from Robert, scheduling a meeting to discuss the developments. The meeting was set for the late afternoon at the police director's office. When they arrived at the office, Robert was in a meeting with other officers, but made sure to find time to meet with Sandra and James. He greeted them with a firm handshake and a serious demeanor. "James, Sandra, thank you for coming," Robert said, pointing to the chairs in front of his desk. "Let's talk about what we've discovered so far." After they were settled, Robert began explaining the progress. "The investigation has begun. I've spoken with several people and discovered that Officer Thompson has a history of similar complaints. This isn't an isolated case, and it's raising serious concerns." Sandra looked at Robert, worried. "And what does that mean for him? Will there be disciplinary actions?" Robert nodded, his expression firm. "Yes. The process will include a thorough review of the officer's actions, and appropriate disciplinary measures will be taken. Additionally, we're implementing a mandatory training program on discrimination and professional conduct for the entire department." James looked relieved, but still uncertain. "And what about the impact on our daughter? She's still very shaken. How can we ensure that this doesn't affect her life any further?" Robert paused and looked at Sandra and James with understanding. "That's a valid concern. As part of the investigation, I'm working to ensure that the officer has no further contact with Aisha. I'm also coordinating with the school to provide additional support for her. Her well-being is a priority." Sandra took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "Thank you for that, Robert. We just want Aisha to feel safe and for this situation to be resolved." Robert offered an encouraging smile. "I completely understand. We will continue to monitor the situation and ensure that your family receives the necessary support." As the meeting concluded, Robert made sure Sandra and James were updated and comfortable with the progress of the investigation. They left the office feeling renewed hope, confident that they were on the right path to resolving the situation. The next day, Aisha found unexpected support at school. Mr. Miller, the counselor, had organized a meeting with some classmates and teachers to discuss the importance of respect and empathy. During the meeting, Mr. Miller addressed Aisha's incident sensitively, emphasizing the need for mutual support. "It's important that we all be attentive and support each other, especially in difficult times. What happened to Aisha is an opportunity for us to learn and grow as a community," Mr. Miller told the group of students and teachers. Aisha felt touched by the counselor's words and the way her classmates and teachers showed empathy. The meeting helped create a more supportive environment for her, and the feeling of having support around her helped her cope with the situation in a more positive way. As the investigation progressed and corrective actions were taken, Aisha felt more hopeful. The truth was coming to light, and with the support of her family, friends, and community, she was beginning to find the strength to move forward and fight for the justice she deserved. The sun shone over Dallas on a clear, vibrant day, bringing a sense of normalcy to Aisha's life after the tumultuous events of the past days. At school, the atmosphere was lighter, with students and teachers coming together around Aisha, offering support and understanding. The meeting organized by Mr. Miller had helped create a more welcoming environment for her. At the Williams home, Sandra and James were discussing the next steps to ensure that Aisha's situation was resolved and that meaningful changes were made. Sandra was on the phone, talking to Robert Anderson for an update on the investigation. "Robert, how's the investigation going?" Sandra asked, her tone mixing anxiety and hope. "Sandra, I'm in regular contact with the investigation team. Officer Thompson is under review, and we're taking steps to ensure he has no further contact with Aisha or other residents of the community," Robert replied, his voice firm and reassuring. "Additionally, I'm working with the department to implement new training and policies." Sandra smiled upon hearing Robert's words, feeling relieved to know that action was being taken. "That's a relief for us. Thank you for your prompt response and the support you're providing." "You're welcome, Sandra. It's our duty to ensure that such incidents don't happen again," Robert replied before ending the call. James walked into the kitchen, observing his wife with a concerned look. "How was the call with Robert?" James asked, grabbing a glass of water. Sandra put the phone down and smiled at him. It was positive. He's really committed to resolving the situation and making sure measures are taken to prevent future issues. James nodded, relieved but still thoughtful. That's great. But we need to think about how we can support Aisha even more. Maybe it's time to involve the community and make an effort to ensure this isn't forgotten. Sandra agreed with a nod. I think that's a good idea. A community meeting might be a great way to address what happened and discuss how we can work together to improve the situation. James picked up his phone and started looking into possible dates and locations for the meeting. I'll start planning that. A community meeting could be a great opportunity to raise awareness and promote positive change. Later, news of the community meeting spread quickly. Aisha, now feeling a bit more at ease with the support from school and the promise of changes, heard about the event while talking to Sarah during lunch break. I heard your parents are organizing a community meeting about what happened to you. Sarah commented, looking at Aisha with an encouraging smile. Aisha nodded, a mix of apprehension and relief on her face. Yes, my parents are planning it. I think it's a good idea. Maybe it will help prevent things like this from happening to others. Sarah smiled and held Aisha's hand. It definitely will. And you're not alone in this. I'll call Robert and check on the progress of the investigation. We should also consider doing more awareness campaigns in the community. While James made the call, Sandra decided to spend some time with Aisha. She went to her daughter's room, where Aisha was reading a book. Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling today? Sandra asked, sitting down beside Aisha on the bed. Aisha looked up at her mother with a faint smile. I'm okay, Mom. A bit nervous, but okay. It's strange to think that all this could change so many things. Sandra took Aisha's hand and held it gently. It's normal to feel that way. And that's why we're doing everything we can to make sure real changes happen. Your courage in speaking out about what happened is helping to transform the community. Aisha smiled gratefully, feeling comforted by her mother's words. Thanks, Mom. I just hope things get better and that no one else has to go through what I went through. As Sandra and Aisha talked, James finished his call with Robert Anderson. When James entered the room, he looked relieved. Robert updated me on the investigation. They're reviewing all complaints against Officer Thompson and working on implementing stricter policies on police conduct. Sandra and Aisha listened attentively, and Sandra asked, and what about the legal process? Is there any timeline for when we might have a conclusion? James paused before responding. Robert said the process might take some time, but he assured me everything is being done to expedite the review. They're also developing a series of workshops and training sessions for police officers, focusing on sensitivity and respect for diversity. Aisha nodded, her expression becoming more resolute. I hope this helps to prevent more people from going through what I went through. The community meeting and ongoing support were beginning to make a real difference, but the fight for justice was far from over. Sandra and James continued to work tirelessly to ensure that the incident wasn't just a story, but a catalyst for lasting change. At the end of the day, the family gathered again to discuss their next steps. James and Sandra were brainstorming ways to further involve the community and promote awareness about respect and equality. I think it would be a good idea to create a support group for victims of discrimination and injustice. James suggested, looking at Sandra. We could work with other local organizations to offer support and resources. Sandra smiled, impressed with the idea. That would be great. And we could also organize regular events to promote dialogue and education on these topics. Aisha, who had been listening, felt inspired. I can help with that. Maybe I can use my experience to assist others who have been through similar situations. Sandra and James looked at their daughter with pride. Aisha, that would be wonderful. Your courage and willingness to help others are truly inspiring. The Williams family was adapting to a new reality, where their personal experiences were helping to shape a fairer and more inclusive future. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but with Aisha's determination and the ongoing support from her parents and the community, there was a growing sense that change was possible and that a positive impact was beginning to be felt. The summer in Dallas was at its peak, bringing with it the typical heat and bustle of the season. For the Williams family, the heat was not just a meteorological phenomenon, but also a metaphor for the intensity of the challenges they were facing. The investigation into Officer Thompson was progressing, and corrective measures were being implemented. However, the fight for justice was far from over, and the process was starting to reveal more complex aspects of the situation. Aisha was preparing for a special event that her parents had organized, an awareness session on discrimination and equality, featuring experts and civil rights advocates. As she got ready, she chatted with Sandra in her room. "Mom, I'm a bit nervous about tonight's event," Aisha admitted, adjusting her blouse in the mirror. Sandra approached and placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's normal to feel nervous, honey. But remember, you're doing something very important. Your effort is helping to create a real impact in our community." Aisha smiled at her mother, trying to absorb the confidence and support Sandra was offering. "Thanks, Mom. I just hope people really listen to what we have to say and that it makes a difference." On the same day, James was reviewing the final details of the event at his desk. He received a message from Robert Anderson requesting a discussion on some last-minute updates. "Sandra, Robert sent me a message. It seems he has some new information to share before the event," James said, looking at Sandra with a concerned expression. Sandra, who was organizing some informational brochures, looked up. "Let's meet with him then. It's better to be prepared for anything he might have to say." Later, Robert arrived at the Williams home with a serious demeanor. He greeted Sandra and James before sitting at the table. "Thank you for having me," Robert began, looking at them with gravity. "I have some important updates. The investigation is revealing not only Officer Thompson's misconduct, but also some deeper issues within the department." James frowned, concerned. "What exactly is going on? Is there something we should know?" Robert took a deep breath before continuing. "It appears that Thompson's behavior wasn't an isolated case. We're finding evidence of a culture of tolerance for problematic attitudes in some parts of the department. This includes lack of oversight and, in some cases, complicity with discriminatory practices." Sandra looked alarmed and raised her hand to interrupt. "So what does this mean for the future? Will there be enough changes to address these issues?" Robert nodded, his face tense. "Yes, we're implementing significant reforms, including a complete review of internal procedures, the introduction of new reporting mechanisms, and increased oversight. However, these changes will take time to be effective and require ongoing effort." James looked at Robert with determination. "We appreciate you keeping us informed. We'll continue to support any initiative that promotes justice and accountability." The event began that evening, and the hall was filled with residents, community leaders, and civil rights advocates. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and hope. Aisha, Sandra, and James were at the front, ready to start the presentations. Robert Anderson was the first to take the stage, addressing the audience with a firm tone. "Good evening, everyone. We are here tonight to discuss the importance of equality and respect in our community. The recent investigation has revealed serious issues, and it is crucial that we face these issues head-on and work to create lasting change." After Robert's introduction, Aisha took the stage. She spoke with courage and clarity, sharing her experience and the importance of the reforms being discussed. "Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. My experience was difficult and painful, but I'm here to talk about how we can use this to make positive changes. What we need is a system that truly protects and respects everyone and ensures that none of this happens again." The audience listened attentively, and Aisha's presence, courage, and desire for change had a visible impact. Several community members stood up to express support and offer suggestions on how to improve the situation. "I think your story is a powerful reminder that we need to come together and take action," one of the residents said, standing up. "We need more transparency and a real commitment to justice." The event was a success, and the sense of unity and purpose was clear. Aisha, Sandra, and James felt relieved and hopeful seeing the community's support and commitment to change. As the night drew to a close, the Williams family was exhausted but satisfied. They had faced the past and were helping to shape a better future. Although the road to justice was still long, the growing determination and ongoing support were promising signs that change was possible and was beginning to take shape. The fall in Dallas brought a change of pace for the Williams family. The city was starting to adapt to the reforms and new policies implemented following the case involving Officer Thompson. Aisha was back to her regular activities, including school and the volunteer work she had started as part of her mission to promote justice and equality. It was a quiet afternoon when Sandra and James were at home, reviewing some documents and discussing the next steps to ensure that the change was lasting. The sound of the door opening indicated that Aisha was arriving from one of her activities. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." Aisha entered the room with a smile on her face, carrying a folder with some papers. "How was your day?" "Hey, dear. It was a productive day. We're just going over some details about the awareness campaigns and the work we still need to do." "How was your day?" Aisha sat down next to her mother, placing the folder on the table. "It was great. I had a meeting with the support group team. We're planning an event to help young people like me find support and resources. We're also organizing workshops to educate people about the importance of respect and diversity." James approached, watching Aisha's enthusiasm with a smile. "That's wonderful, Aisha. Your work is making a big difference. How's school going?" Aisha smiled and began to talk about her progress. "Things are going well. I feel more confident now, and the teachers and classmates have been very supportive. Plus, the school is starting to incorporate more discussions about diversity and respect into their classes." Sandra picked up a coffee and offered Aisha a sip. "I'm so proud of you, dear. You're turning your experience into something positive and helping to make a real difference." As they chatted, the phone rang. James answered, and after a few minutes of conversation, turned to Sandra and Aisha with an interested look. "Folks, we've just received an invitation to present our story and the changes we've made at a national conference on social justice and policing. They want to highlight our work as a success story in the fight against discrimination." Sandra and Aisha exchanged surprised and excited glances. "That would be incredible!" Aisha exclaimed, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "It would be a fantastic opportunity to share our story with a larger audience and inspire others." James nodded, visibly pleased with Aisha's reaction. "I agree. I think it would be a great way to continue promoting awareness and the positive impact of the reforms. Let's consider this proposal and start preparing to present our story in the best possible way." With the new project in mind, the Williams family began preparing for the conference. They spent weeks reviewing their presentations, preparing materials, and rehearsing their speeches. Aisha dedicated a lot of time to practicing her talk and ensuring her message was clear and impactful. Finally, the day of the conference arrived. The Williams family traveled to the city where the event was held. The environment was filled with professionals, civil rights advocates, and participants from all over the country. It was a golden opportunity to share their experiences and contribute to a broader conversation about justice and equality. When it was Aisha's turn to take the stage, she was nervous, but also excited. She took a deep breath and began speaking to the audience. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aisha Williams, and I'm here to share my experience and the changes that have occurred in my community following an incident of discrimination. I want to talk about how we turned a difficult situation into an opportunity to promote justice and equality." The audience listened attentively as Aisha shared her story with honesty and courage. She spoke about the impact of police misconduct, the reforms implemented, and the importance of supporting victims and fostering a culture of respect. After the presentation, there was a Q&A session. Several attendees raised their hands to express their doubts and share their own experiences. Aisha responded with clarity and empathy, demonstrating how much she had grown throughout this journey. When the conference ended, Sandra and James were very proud of Aisha. They gathered with her at the end of the event, receiving praise and thanks from several attendees. "You were amazing, Aisha," Sandra said, hugging her daughter. "Your presentation was moving and inspiring." James also expressed his pride. "You did an exceptional job. Your courage is truly making a difference and helping to promote important changes." Aisha smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Thank you. I feel like we're doing something really meaningful. And it gives me hope for a better future where everyone can be treated with dignity and respect. Back in Dallas, the Williams family continued their work with renewed energy and determination. The experience at the conference reinforced their belief in the importance of their mission and the need to keep fighting for justice and equality. They were ready to face new challenges and continue making a difference in their lives and the community around them. As winter approached, the Williams family found themselves in a period of reflection and planning. The reforms in the police department were underway, and the national conference had been a success, but ensuring that the changes were sustainable required ongoing effort. Aisha, Sandra, and James were determined to continue promoting justice and inclusion in their community. It was a cold, cloudy morning when Sandra and James gathered in their home, discussing the next steps to ensure that the progress made would not be forgotten. We need to find ways to keep the community engaged and ensure that the reforms remain effective, James said, reviewing some proposals in a folder. We can't let this become just a distant memory. Sandra agreed, placing a cup of coffee next to James. I agree. And I think we should also consider expanding our reach to other communities that might face similar issues. We can share our experiences and offer support. At that moment, Aisha entered the room, carrying a box of materials for a new project. Hi, everyone. I was organizing some materials for the next workshop we're holding at the community center. Aisha placed the box on the table and sat down next to her parents. I was also thinking about ways to make our events more interactive and educational. Sandra smiled at her daughter, admiring her enthusiasm. That's great, Aisha. What do you have in mind? Aisha pulled out some flyers and plans from the box. I want to include more hands-on activities and group discussions. I think it will help make the information more accessible and engaging. And maybe we could also create a space for people to share their own experiences and support each other. James paused to consider the idea. That sounds very promising. Personal interaction and sharing experiences can be very powerful. Let's start planning that and see how we can integrate it into our future events. With the plan in mind, the Williams family began working on preparing the new workshops and events. They met with community leaders, educators, and civil rights advocates to develop a program that was comprehensive and impactful. One day, while they were at the community center setting up for the next workshop, Sandra and James were approached by a local journalist, Laura Mitchell, who wanted to cover the impact of the reforms and the Williams family's activities. Hi, Sandra, James, Aisha. Laura began with a friendly smile. I'd like to do an interview with you for an article about how the community is adapting to the changes and the impact of your work. Would you be willing to share a bit about the progress and the challenges you've faced? James looked at Sandra and Aisha, and they all agreed to participate. Of course, Laura. We'd be happy to share our experiences. James replied, inviting Laura to sit down. During the interview, Laura asked questions about the reforms, the family's work, and the challenges still ahead. How have you dealt with the challenges of keeping the community engaged and ensuring that the changes are sustainable? Laura asked, looking at Aisha. Aisha thought for a moment before responding. I think the key is ongoing communication and creating spaces where people can express themselves and support each other. We're trying to make our events not just informative, but also interactive, so everyone feels part of the change process. Sandra added with an optimistic tone. And in addition, we're working to form partnerships with other organizations and communities. I believe that by joining forces, we can tackle challenges more effectively and ensure that progress continues. Laura took notes and thanked the family for their time and willingness to share. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your stories and efforts. Your journey is truly inspiring, and I believe it will resonate with many readers. With the interview complete, the Williams family continued their preparations, feeling more motivated to tackle the challenges ahead. They knew the work was far from over and that the true test would be ensuring that the changes were sustainable and that the community continued to benefit from the reforms. On the night of the workshop, the community center was packed. Participants engaged in activities, discussed their experiences, and learned more about the impact of the reforms. The atmosphere was filled with energy and hope, and the interaction among participants highlighted the success of the new format. After the event, Sandra and James were discussing with Aisha what worked well and what could be improved. "I think the interactive format really helped engage people," Sandra said, looking at the materials and feedback from participants. "We're on the right track." Aisha smiled, visibly pleased with the results. "I agree. And I think we should keep adjusting and improving based on the feedback we receive. What's important is to keep the dialogue open and make sure the community's needs are being met." James concluded, with a sense of accomplishment. "We're making significant progress, but there's still work to be done. Let's continue to dedicate ourselves and look for new ways to support and educate the community." As the night fell over Dallas, the Williams family felt uplifted by the experience and the results achieved. They were ready to face new challenges with renewed determination, knowing that the path to justice and equality was an ongoing journey, but that they were well-positioned to make a difference. Winter had set in Dallas, bringing with it a sense of closure and reflection. The city had adapted to the reforms and new programs promoted by the Williams family, and the changes began to show positive results. But for Sandra, James, and Aisha, the work was far from over. They were focused on ensuring that the lasting impact of their actions was maintained and that the memory of the challenges faced would inspire future generations. It was a cold, overcast day when the Williams family gathered in their living room, discussing the final details of a special event they had planned, a celebration and thank you ceremony for the community, aimed at recognizing the contributions of everyone who had helped implement the reforms and support the cause. "I think everything is ready for today's event," Sandra said, checking a list of tasks. "We're prepared to welcome everyone and share the progress we've made." James looked at his wife with a satisfied smile. "Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing people's reactions. This is a moment to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of everyone involved." Aisha entered the room, dressed for the occasion, and joined the conversation. "I'm a bit nervous, but also very excited. This event is a way to show that the changes are real and that our community has truly come together to make a difference." Sandra approached Aisha and gave her an encouraging hug. "You've done an amazing job, Aisha. This event is both a celebration and an opportunity to reflect on the positive impact we've achieved." As the afternoon progressed, the community center started to fill up. The atmosphere was lively and full of anticipation. Various community leaders, supporters of the reforms, and community members were present, all ready to celebrate the progress and reflect on the journey. Robert Anderson, now a continued ally of the Williams family, made his appearance and greeted the family with a warm smile. "Hello, James, Sandra, Aisha," Robert said, shaking their hands. "I'm so pleased to see how things have evolved. This event is a testament to the impact that dedication and collaboration can have." James replied with a tone of gratitude. "Thank you, Robert. Your help and support have been crucial in getting us to this point." The event began with an informal reception where attendees could mingle, chat, and share their own stories. Then the official ceremony started, with Sandra, James, and Aisha taking the stage to speak. Aisha was the first to address the audience. She looked out at the crowd, feeling a wave of emotion. "Good evening, everyone. I want to start by thanking each of you for being here tonight and for being part of this journey. When it all began, we didn't know how things would unfold, but the support from the community and everyone's determination made a huge difference." She paused and looked at her parents, who were standing beside her. "My parents and I wouldn't be here today without the help and commitment of many of you. What we've achieved is a reflection of the power of unity and the will to fight for a better future." Sandra took the microphone and continued Aisha's speech. "I also want to express my deep gratitude to everyone who participated, supported, and contributed to the reforms and events we've organized. It's through collaboration and mutual support that we've been able to tackle challenges and create real change." James concluded the speech with a hopeful and resolute tone. "This event is not only a celebration, but also a reminder that the fight for justice and equality is an ongoing journey. We must continue to work together to ensure that the values we promote become part of our culture and community." After the speeches, the ceremony continued with presentations of appreciation to individuals and organizations who played key roles in implementing the reforms. There was also a space dedicated to testimonials from people whose lives had been positively impacted by the changes. One of the guests, Mrs. Thompson, who had been a leading advocate for the reforms, took the stage to share her words. "It's an honor to be here tonight and see the impact of the work we've all done together. The fight for justice doesn't end here, but what we've achieved is a testament to what we can accomplish when we unite for a common cause." The audience applauded enthusiastically, reflecting the sense of accomplishment and hope that permeated the event. As the evening went on, conversations and celebrations continued, with people exchanging ideas and plans for the future. When the event finally came to an end, Sandra, James, and Aisha gathered to reflect on the night. "I think everything went really well," James said, looking at his wife and daughter. "It was a significant moment to acknowledge the hard work and positive impact we've made." Sandra agreed, with a satisfied smile. "Yes, and it's wonderful to see how the community came together to celebrate and support these changes. The future looks promising, and I'm sure we'll continue to see the fruits of our labor." Aisha, looking at the bustling room, felt a deep sense of gratitude. "I'm really happy with what we've achieved and hope we can continue to inspire others to fight for justice and equality." The night was cold, but the warmth of the celebration and the sense of accomplishment warmed the hearts of the Williams family. They were ready to face new challenges and continue their work, knowing that the legacy of their actions and the fight for justice would keep making a difference in the lives of many people.